accidentally punched Renee or hit her in some kind of way, maybe the play goes on, but I help her up. I help her up. You know what I mean? Just out of the like, dang, my bad. So I think that part is important too, the reaction. Maybe if Alyssa Thomas would have even turned like, dang, my bad, I didn't mean to hit you like that. It's a different thing, but that's not what happened. And so I think that the league got it right. But I think overall, Coach Tibbetts is correct. Everything, consistency is important. It needs to be cleaned up for all players, regardless of what their accolades are. None of that part matters. It matters about protecting these players, no matter which team, which position, when they sub in, the start of the game to the end of the game. Every player.
Lisa Leslie didn't hold back. And when a WNBA legend with 4 Olympic gold medals calls out your organization on national television, you know the situation has escalated beyond damage control. But here's what makes this particularly explosive. Leslie isn't just criticizing a player. She's dismantling the entire defense strategy that Nate Tibbetts and the Phoenix Mercury tried to deploy after Alyssa Thomas was suspended for punching Caitlin Clark in the throat. And the way she methodically breaks down why their argument falls apart, that's what we need to examine, because this controversy reveals something deeper about how the WNBA handles player safety when their biggest star is involved.
This is Nate Tibbetts right here, right now.
I'd like to address the AT situation. First off, the Mercury organization would like to let AT know that she's 100% supported by us. The people in this league know who AT is. She's a competitor.
The people in this league definitely know who she is. She's a thug, she's a criminal, and she definitely is a dirty player. No matter how you try to spin this, no matter what you try to do, Nate Tibbetts, your player is a dirty player, and she definitely put hands on people.
She's a winner, and she's tough. The one thing she is not is cheap. I respect Steph White. I got to know her with USA Basketball. I respect her as a coach and a person, and I understand her sticking up for Caitlin in this situation. But to say that we had 2 cheap shots in that game, to me, is ridiculous. Steph knows AT. She got the opportunity to coach AT for 2 years, and she knows what AT stands for.
Listen to what Tibbetts is actually claiming here. He's saying Alyssa Thomas is a competitor, a winner, tough, all positive attributes. Then he makes this statement: the one thing she is not is cheap. But here's the problem with that defense. The league office just finished their review. They upgraded the foul, they issued a suspension, and most importantly, they did it without even needing to contact Thomas, Tibbetts, or anyone from the Mercury organization to hear their side of the story. Why? Because when you punch someone in the throat on camera, there's no side of the story that makes it acceptable. The video evidence was sufficient, no investigation required beyond watching the replay. That's not a judgment call about basketball philosophy or defensive intensity. That's a clear violation of player safety standards.
In the W, this was not a thorough investigation, in my opinion. The people involved were not questioned at all. It's extremely disappointing. No one from the league called AT, our security team, or myself about what we felt like happened in this situation. There is a protocol to be followed. Just coming from the NBA, there's been many investigations that I've heard about that there was calls on both sides, and that was not done in this situation, and that's disappointing. I agree with everyone's stance. Let's continue to clean up our game. I'm part of the referee task force, the same that Steph White is, and Cheryl Reeve and Becky Hammond. The goal is to clean up our game, but I do think it's important not to rely on social media.
Now this is where Tibbetts crosses a line that's going to haunt him. He's criticizing the league for not following proper investigation protocol, claiming they should have called the people involved. But let's be specific about what he's really arguing: that the Mercury's security team and coaching staff should have been consulted before suspending a player for an on-court action that was captured on multiple camera angles and reviewed by league officials. Here's the thing about flagrant foul reviews in the WNBA. They follow the same protocol as the NBA. When officials upgrade a foul after reviewing game footage, they don't need to interview the player about their intentions. The action itself determines the penalty. Tibbetts knows this. He's on the referee task force alongside Stephanie White, Cheryl Reeve, and Becky Hammond. He understands the review process, so why is he pretending this required some elaborate investigation?
Standard, even if the roles were reversed in this situation, make the storyline and the suspension the same, and let's just be consistent.
Bro, Nate Tibbetts, this is a bad look, brother. I ain't gonna hold you. Real bad look. Not just him, the whole Phoenix Mercury organization. For them saying that they stand behind her is dispalling. Somebody said you have fans of Alicia Thomas' old team, the Connecticut Sun, saying free AT. These are white liberal beta males with less testosterone. I ain't going to get into all that. Somebody else said, I'm not sure about the rules regarding having a flavoring to lead to a suspension the next game if injection isn't enforced in the proper game. That said, reviewing the foul for upgrade doesn't require contacting anyone to hear a side. It's just like an in-game video review. So they're saying that they didn't even have to contact Alyssa Thomas, Nate Tibbetts, or the Mercury organization.
And there it is, the part that reveals what this is really about. Tibbetts just said the league shouldn't rely on social media screenshots and they should watch the whole play, the whole game. But then he pivots to talking about consistency across different categories of players. Generational talent versus role players, veterans versus rookies, white players versus black players, international versus domestic. Notice what he's doing? He's trying to reframe a player safety issue as a racial equity issue. He's suggesting the only reason Thomas got suspended is because she fouled Caitlin Clark, and Clark's status as a white generational talent with a massive fan base influenced the league's decision. But that argument collapses the moment you look at the actual incident. Because Stephanie White, Clark's own coach, called it a cheap shot. And White coached Alyssa Thomas for 2 years in Connecticut. She knows Thomas's playing style intimately. For White to publicly contradict her former player and call out the Mercury for having multiple cheap shots in that game, that tells you everything about how blatant the foul was.
Earlier today, this Nate Tibbetts situation was going to not end well. He was very unprofessional. He needed to be fined, and he should be relieved of his duties coaching the Mercury after justifying Caitlin Clark being assault. He definitely needed to just hang it up and let it go, bro, at this point. Well, guess what, y'all? I'm not the only one that feel a certain type of way because WNBA legend Lisa Leslie just read him his rights, bro. Yes, she did earlier today on ESPN. Let's pull it up right now. I'm about to get ready and go to it for you guys because this right here is a clear sign to me. It ain't going to end well for Nate Tibbetts. He should have thought about what he said. He should have went like on a script or something because I don't believe they had a script written for.
Go back and watch that opening reaction again. The commentator is saying Tibbetts was unprofessional, needs to be fined, and should be relieved of his coaching duties. That's not typical sports talk radio hyperbole. That's a measured response to a coach who just publicly accused the WNBA of racial bias in their officiating and disciplinary decisions without providing any evidence beyond, my player said it wasn't intentional. Here's what makes Tibbetts' press conference particularly damaging to his own credibility. He admits he's part of the referee task force. He acknowledges the goal is to clean up the game. He says consistency is important. Then he spends 5 minutes undermining the league's attempt to enforce that consistency by suggesting the only reason they acted was because of Clark's demographics and popularity. You can't have it both ways. Either you want consistent enforcement of player safety rules, or you want officials to consider a player's reputation and intentions before issuing penalties. Tibbetts is arguing for both simultaneously, which makes his position incoherent.
What we're dealing with, this is the situation at hand, and there is no justifying this action right here. There is a blatant fist to the throat of this young lady, and I'm telling you right now, I don't give a damn how they try to spin it, turn it, move it around. You cannot. For Stephanie White to defend Caitlin Clark, and we know how we feel about good old Steph. For her to say it was cheap shots, it really had to have been cheap shots. Now, Stephanie White, like he stated, was the former coach of Alyssa Thomas. Definitely she was. But for Stephanie White to go on record, which she probably got fined, that lets me know that, yeah, this right here was definitely intentional, and it just make me wonder. I see a lot of people going with the narrative once again that Caitlin Clark got benched. Maybe, just maybe, hypothetical, this is my opinion, the Indiana Fever removed Caitlin Clark for the game for further injury, for further assault, because they probably seen something like this. And I think that for myself, I was at this game, and they was definitely doing little knee tactics, little tripping. There was a lot of things happening. Just maybe the Indiana Fever says, you know what, Kaylin, it might be in your best interest to sit the rest of this game out. I believe that it definitely could be the case. That could have been why Caitlin Clark was mad, didn't really break the huddle, walked straight to the locker room, because maybe they just...
Now let's address the speculation about why Caitlin Clark was benched for the final minutes of that game. The commentator raises an interesting theory that the Indiana Fever coaching staff pulled Clark not because the game was out of reach, but because they saw a pattern of dangerous play from Phoenix and wanted to protect their franchise player from further injury risk. Think about what we know. Clark is already dealing with back issues. She's been targeted with hard fouls throughout her rookie season. The Fever have a legitimate interest in preserving her health for the playoffs. And if the coaching staff observed multiple incidents in that game that crossed the line from physical defense into reckless endangerment, pulling your star player is the responsible decision. Clark's reaction, walking straight to the locker room without breaking the huddle, suggests she disagreed with the decision. But that's exactly what you'd expect from a competitor who wants to finish the game regardless of the score. The problem for the Mercury is that this theory, whether accurate or not, is now part of the narrative. Fans are rewatching that game looking for other incidents beyond the Thomas punch. And when you have Stephanie White, who has every incentive to maintain good relationships with opponents and officials, going on record to say Phoenix had multiple cheap shots, that validates the concern that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern of play that endangered Clark throughout the night.
Said, you know, they doing a little too much. You getting, like, we don't want you to get hurt. We know you're dealing with your back injuries. And the way they playing you tonight just might not be your night. That is a big possibility as to why Caitlin Clark left that game. But man, oh man, this is not looking good for the Phoenix Mercury. Somebody said, are you effing kidding me? The Phoenix Mercury is okay with the bruise of a player, a white straight player at that. This coach knows damn well AT gets cheap-ish, and every time she gets a chance. Somebody else said, to say the Mercury had 2 cheap shots in that game is ridiculous. It was more like 5 or 6. Definitely more like 5 or 6. This guy is delusional or has to follow the company line. Either way, it's bad. Very bad look for Nate Tibbetts. He mentioned the videos can be deceiving, but any way you look at it, it was dangerous and harmful. And just like I told y'all, ain't no way you can spin it, turn it, move it around. This bad. But get down in the comment section. Let me know y'all.
Here's what the Mercury organization needs to understand about their public response. When you issue a statement saying you stand behind Alyssa Thomas 100% after she's been suspended for punching an opponent in the throat, you're not just supporting your player. You're telling every other team in the league that you condone that behavior. You're signaling to officials that you'll undermine their authority when they penalize your players for dangerous play. And you're creating a perception problem that extends beyond this single incident. Look at the fan reaction. Even Connecticut Sun fans, Thomas's former team, are questioning the Mercury's judgment. When your own fan base is uncomfortable with how you're defending a player, that should trigger some organizational self-reflection. The comment about white liberal beta males supporting Thomas reveals how toxic this discourse has become. This isn't about basketball anymore. It's become a culture war proxy battle where people are choosing sides based on identity politics rather than evaluating the actual incident on its merits. The Mercury had an opportunity to handle this professionally. They could have acknowledged the foul was unacceptable, supported the league's disciplinary decision, and moved forward with a commitment to cleaner play. Instead, Tibbetts held a press conference that accused the league of bias, questioned their investigation process, and turned a straightforward player safety issue into a referendum on how the WNBA treats different categories of players. That's organizational malpractice. So let's synthesize what actually happened here, because the Mercury's defense strategy has deliberately muddied the waters. On June 23rd, during a game between the Indiana Fever and Phoenix Mercury, Alyssa Thomas committed a flagrant foul against Caitlin Clark. The contact was a closed fist strike to Clark's throat area. Officials called a common foul during the game. After reviewing the footage, the league office upgraded it to a flagrant foul and issued a 1-game suspension to Thomas. This is standard protocol for dangerous contact to the head and neck area. The Mercury's response was to claim the league didn't conduct a thorough investigation because they didn't interview Thomas, the coaching staff, or the security team. But here's what they're not telling you. Flagrant foul reviews don't require player interviews. The action on the court determines the penalty. If you punch someone in the throat on camera, your intentions are irrelevant. The league doesn't need to ask if you meant to do it. The fact that you did it is sufficient for disciplinary action. Nate Tibbetts then suggested the suspension was influenced by Caitlin Clark's status as a generational talent with a large fan base, implying that a role player who committed the same foul against a less popular player wouldn't receive the same penalty. But this argument ignores the severity of the contact. Closed-fist strikes to the throat aren't basketball plays. They're not even aggressive defense. They're assaults that happen to occur during a basketball game. And the league has a responsibility to remove players who engage in that conduct, regardless of who they hit. Stephanie White's response is particularly significant here. White coached Alyssa Thomas in Connecticut for 2 years. She knows Thomas's playing style, her competitive nature, her defensive techniques, and White publicly stated that the Mercury had 2 cheap shots in that game, directly contradicting Tibbetts' characterization of Thomas as a tough but clean player. For a coach to call out a former player like that requires a level of concern about player safety that overrides professional courtesy and relationship maintenance. Lisa Leslie's analysis on ESPN reinforced White's position. Leslie acknowledged that officiating is difficult and that she wasn't surprised the officials missed the call in real time. But she emphasized that the league got it right in their post-game review. More importantly, Leslie talked about the culture of player protection that existed when she played. Even in physical games with loose ball scrambles and hard fouls, players helped each other up. They acknowledged when contact crossed a line. That sportsmanship created an environment where physical play didn't escalate into dangerous play. What's missing from Thomas's response, and from the Mercury's organizational response, is any acknowledgement that the contact was unacceptable. Thomas didn't turn around and check on Clark after the hit. She didn't apologize or even gesture that it was unintentional. The Mercury didn't issue a statement saying, "We accept the league's decision and commit to cleaner play going forward." Instead, they circled the wagons, defended the indefensible, and accused the league of bias. This creates a broader problem for the WNBA. The league is experiencing unprecedented growth in viewership, largely driven by Caitlin Clark's rookie season. Average attendance is up 32% compared to last year. Television ratings have doubled for games featuring Clark. This growth brings increased scrutiny from media, fans, and sponsors who aren't familiar with the league's history or culture. When those new viewers see a player punch the league's biggest star in the throat, and then see the offending player's coach accuse the league of racial bias for issuing a one-game suspension, it creates a perception that the WNBA doesn't take player safety seriously. The Mercury's argument about consistency is actually correct, but not in the way Tibbetts intended. The league does need consistent enforcement of player safety rules across all players, regardless of their status, popularity, or demographics. But that consistency should mean suspending anyone who commits a flagrant foul involving contact to the head and neck area, not declining to suspend anyone because it might create controversy or accusations of favoritism. The standard should be, if you punch someone in the throat, you sit out the next game. Every time. No exceptions. No investigations into intentions or context. The action itself triggers the penalty. What Tibbetts is actually advocating for, whether he realizes it or not, is a 2-tiered system where star players receive more protection and role players receive more leniency. He's suggesting that suspending Alyssa Thomas for hitting Caitlin Clark represents unfair treatment because Thomas isn't a superstar and Clark is. But that's backwards. Player safety rules should protect everyone equally. A punch to the throat is a punch to the throat, regardless of who throws it or who receives it. The racial dynamics that Tibbetts introduced into this conversation are particularly troubling. By explicitly mentioning white players versus black players in his press conference, he's suggesting that the league's disciplinary decision was influenced by racial bias. But he provides no evidence for this claim beyond the fact that Clark is white and Thomas is black. This is a serious accusation that undermines the league's credibility and poisons the discourse around player safety. If Tibbetts has evidence that the WNBA applies different standards based on race, he should present it. If he doesn't have that evidence, he shouldn't make the accusation. The speculation about why Indiana benched Clark in the final minutes adds another layer to this controversy. If the Fever coaching staff observed a pattern of dangerous play from Phoenix and made a decision to protect their franchise player from further injury risk, that's a damning indictment of how that game was being officiated in real time. It suggests the officials were allowing physical play to escalate beyond acceptable boundaries, creating an environment where coaches felt they needed to remove their stars for safety reasons rather than strategic reasons. Clark's visible frustration with being benched, walking straight to the locker room without engaging with the huddle, indicates she wanted to stay in the game. But sometimes protecting a player requires overruling their competitive instincts. If Clark is dealing with back issues and the Fever have playoff aspirations, risking a serious injury in a game that's already decided makes no sense. The fact that this decision was necessary, if the theory is correct, represents a failure of officiating to maintain control of the game's physicality. The Mercury organization now faces a choice about how to move forward. They can continue defending Alyssa Thomas and criticizing the league's disciplinary process, which will further damage their reputation and relationships with officials, opponents, and the league office. Or they can acknowledge that the foul was unacceptable, accept the suspension, and commit to playing physical but clean basketball going forward. The first option might satisfy their current fan base but will create long-term problems. The second option requires admitting they were wrong, which is difficult but necessary. For Nate Tibbetts specifically, this press conference may have permanently damaged his credibility with the league office and with other coaches. He's on the referee task force, which means he's supposed to be working collaboratively with the league to improve officiating consistency and player safety. Instead, he used a player safety incident involving his own team to accuse the league of racial bias and procedural failures. That makes it very difficult for him to participate productively in future task force discussions. How can you work on improving the system when you've publicly stated you don't trust the system to make fair decisions? The broader question this controversy raises is about the WNBA's ability to manage its growth while maintaining the competitive intensity and physical play that defines the league's culture. New fans attracted by Caitlin Clark's popularity are watching games with different expectations than longtime WNBA fans. They're comparing the product to NBA games, college basketball, and international competitions. When they see incidents like the Thomas punch, they form judgments about the league's professionalism and player safety standards based on how the league responds. The WNBA got this one right. They reviewed the footage, upgraded the foul, issued an appropriate suspension, and did it all quickly and transparently. The problem is that one of the league's head coaches then spent 5 minutes on camera undermining that decision and accusing the league of bias. That's what created the controversy, not the suspension itself. If Tibbetts had simply said, "We disagree with the suspension but respect the league's decision," this would have been a one-day story. Instead, he turned it into a multi-day referendum on how the WNBA treats different players. So here's the question for you. Was Nate Tibbetts defending his player, or was he defending dangerous basketball? Because you can't watch that footage and argue the contact was acceptable. You can argue it wasn't intentional. You can argue Thomas deserves credit for being a tough competitor. But you cannot argue that punching someone in the throat is within the boundaries of physical basketball. And when a coach tries to make that argument, it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of where the line is between competitive intensity and player endangerment. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this conversation is far from over.